Welcome to Inner Peace Better Health with your host Saima, the podcast where we break free from limitations and step into our fullest potential. Today we have a powerhouse guest, Steve Gallegos, who is here to challenge everything we think we know about our own stories. Steve is a US Marine veteran entrepreneur, speaker, coach, and a master of transformation. His mission is to help people realize that you are not your story. Too often we let past experiences, failures, or labels define us. But what if we could rewrite the script and take full control of our lives? Steve's journey includes moments of resilience, bold rule breaking, including a wild story, about convincing the President of the United States to help him become a US citizen and learning how to take ownership of his own life narrative. Now, if you felt stuck in your past, weighed down by limiting beliefs or unsure how to take charge of your future, this episode is for you. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. The light.
You're warmly welcome. Now, you say that you're not your story, and that's really powerful. So, what do you mean by that, and why do so many people feel trapped by the past?
That is a great question. Why do so many
Mm-hmm,
people get caught up in their stories and get caught up in the past? It's because our stories are given to us before the age of 7. Remember when you were born, when you were a young child, you didn't know anything when you came into this world. You didn't have any experiences. You didn't know anything about anything. And so the way that we learn as children is through our parents, through the experiences of our parents. And so before the age of 7, we were just sponges. We didn't have any filters. And so if we saw our parents, for example, fighting all the time, and then at the end of the fight they would hug and they say, I love you, our little brains receive the message that love means fighting. It's okay to fight somebody that you love. And it becomes even worse when you see your parents being physical towards one another, right? Abusive towards one another. We grew up with
mm-hmm,
these ideas that that's okay because that's how we saw our parents do it. And so when it comes to our own personal stories, it also happens to do with what our parents tell us about ourselves. For example, some people might grow up thinking that they're losers or being told they're stupid or being told, as in my case, that I was good for nothing. And so I grew up with this idea that I didn't have any value because I was constantly hearing, you're good for nothing, you're good for nothing, you're good for nothing. And so it's like a tape recording, right? A hypnosis that we keep receiving every day. And so one day you wake up and you go, well, I'm good for nothing. And so you go out and you do things that good for nothing kids would do, which means what? It means getting in trouble, means violating the law, it means being
mm-hmm,
abusive, means bullying somebody. And then if we don't get a handle on this and realize that this is just a story that we were told, then we move into our adulthood with this idea that it's okay to abuse our spouse because I saw my parents do it. It's okay to yell at my brother because I saw my parents yelling at my brother. You see? And so this is why we get so caught up in our stories. It is about who we believe we are at any point in time. And most people don't know that they can stop and change that story anytime they want.
That's such a profound way of looking at it, and the way you frame that, because so many people do feel weighed down by their past. It's like you're saying that it really offers real freedom, letting people know that they aren't defined by what happened to them. So, what's the 1st
What's the first thing?
What's the first step someone can take to start separating themselves from their old story?
Very good question. What is the first step that one can take in order to start overcoming the story? The first step is to recognize that it is a story. right?
Mm-hmm.
And then recognize, become aware, right? It's the idea of when we talk about inner peace and harmony uh, in our own lives, it's all centered on awareness. And so if we become aware that these problems that we're having in life, whether it's financial, whether it's with our jobs, whether it's with our kids, or problems with our relationships, problems in our marriage, problems with the person that we're dating, we keep having these conflicts. If we become aware that we keep having the same conflict over and over again, we can then become aware where this problem came from, but recognize that the idea or the suggestion that I'm making is not that we go back to try and find out where the problem came from so that we can start pointing fingers and say, it's my mother's fault, it's my father's fault, it's my brother's fault, it's my dog's fault. Um, it's the idea is not to take blame. The idea is simply to identify, whoa, I've been thinking this way since I was 5 years old, since I was 7 years old, since I was 10 years old. And because I know that it started when I was young, when it was in my youth, I also know that it doesn't have to be that way. And so building awareness that it is just a story and that we can change our story at any moment, at any time. In fact, I have this idea that we can yell cut just like they do in the movies. For those of you
Mm-hmm.
listeners that you love movies, especially you being from India, the beautiful country, Bollywood is very big there, right? And there's a lot of movies created there, a lot of very good movies, a lot of very fun movies. They're very
Mm-hmm.
lively. What happens? The director of that movie has a vision for how that story is to unfold. And if the actors on the screen are not performing the way the director envisions, he or she yells, cut, and then he calls the writer. She calls the actors over. She calls the catering people. She calls the costume people. She calls everybody involved in the production that's on set that day and says, come here. We need to revisit this. We need to rewrite the script. Actors, you need to memorize these lines. You need to do things different. You need to behave different. You need to act out this scene differently. And then once everybody knows the rules and once everybody knows their boundaries and what their roles are, the director yells action and the film proceeds again. We can do the same thing in our own lives. If something is not going the way that we desire at work, at home, in our communities, at school, we can simply yell cut. And that's when we stop and we take control. We take control. We become the writer, we become the producer, and we become the director of that story.
That completely makes sense, Steve.
And it's a fun way to do it too. It's a fun way to look at your life because it causes you to, again, going back to the idea of taking responsibility, right? We don't go
Mm-hmm.
back and say it's my parents' fault that I'm this way. Yes, that could very well be true. 100% it's your parents' fault because they programmed you to believe this about yourself. But at this point that you are aware that it's just a story, a program that you were given, a computer program that was downloaded into you,
Mm-hmm.
then it's your responsibility to change it. You can't say, well, I need my parents to call me by different names. I need my parents to think of me differently. No, we're the ones that have to take 100% responsibility. And this is the hardest part for everybody is to take 100% responsibility for our thoughts, for our words, and for our actions, which leads to our decisions, right? Or rather, I said that backwards. It's decisions lead to our actions or inactions. We are the ones that have to take 100% responsibility for those elements. And therefore, we can make the change because if we depend on somebody else, the person that we believe is responsible for where we are in life, for how we are in life, if we have to wait for them to make a change, we'll be waiting forever.
That's really remarkable, Steve. Now, you have had an incredible journey from being US Marine to entrepreneur to speaker. So, how did you break out of societal and personal expectations to create a life on your own terms?
That's another very good question. Again, it goes back to building awareness. And at this point, now that we're aware that what we're living is a story, usually a story that somebody else wrote for us. It's like an actor, they play different roles in different movies. And in Bollywood, for example, you have actors that have been seen in multiple movies, right? That actor receives a script from the producer or the director, and they say, read this script, learn this script, this is the role that you're going to play. Well, for many of us, we've been handed a script that somebody else wrote for us. You're going to be an engineer. You're going to be a computer programmer. You're going to be a doctor. But in reality, our heart wants to sing. Our heart wants to paint. Our heart wants to play music. Our heart wants to become a photographer. Our heart wants to dance. And so we're given a script that is inconsistent with who we really are as as a human being on this planet going through this journey. And so once we become aware, then we need to develop clarity. And this is the other key point is we need to develop clarity for what it is that we want. If you ask many people, what is it that you want from life? A lot of people would say, oh, I just want to be happy. I want to feel safe. I want to be loved. I want to feel respected. But what does that really mean? And what does that really look like? And this is where clarity comes in. Clarity requires that we sit down in a quiet place, in a quiet moment, and ask ourselves, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my life to feel like? How do I want to express myself and be seen in the world? And once we're able to sit down and answer these questions, and there's a lot of questions that we can ask around these. I recently wrote a book called Unshackled that has
Mhm.
a lists and lists of questions that the reader can ask themselves to identify and come to terms with what they want. And much of what we're feeling, much of what your audience listening to this beautiful program, much of what they're going through is what I call contrast. And as a photographer, I can tell you that contrast is where the light meets the dark. And that's what creates the picture. Because if everything is light, if everything is white, and there's no shade or no black or no other colors in that scene, there's no contrast. So everything looks the same and nothing jumps out at you. And so this is why we need contrast in our lives is if we experience something that we don't like, that's contrast. If we go to work and somebody and our boss yells at us, that's contrast. If we're in a relationship that our partner is abusive, that's contrast. If we find ourselves at the end of the day um, turning to alcohol or drugs or something else that is harmful to our bodies, that's contrast. Those things are present to help us become aware I don't like that or I do like that. And if we feel that we don't like that, we don't like our boss yelling at us, we don't like our partner abusing us, that's contrast. And then we can change it, right? Because we know we don't like it. But the only way that we know what we like and what we don't like is by experiencing those things.
That's really a game changing way to look at it, and I would love to go through your book, Steve.
Yeah.
So, mhm, was there a defining moment when you realized that you had full control over your own story?
Say that again. Say the question again.
Hmm. Was there a defining moment when you realized that you had full control over your own story?
Oh, the defining moment when I realized that I had full control of my own story was
Mm-hmm.
when, for example, at 17 years old, I tried committing suicide several times. Again, because of the belief that I had that I was worthless and good for nothing, which came from my upbringing. So at 17 years old, I tried committing suicide and I was unsuccessful at it. And so I joined the Marine Corps. I ran away to join the Marine Corps. And it was during my basic training in the Marine Corps that I had this experience where I was called upon from my own internal guidance system to help three other individuals that were also in my training class who were primarily Spanish speaking. In other words, they couldn't speak English very well. And because they couldn't speak English very well, they were failing the academic portion of the Marine Corps basic training. And so I took it upon myself to become their tutor and their mentor. And every night, when everybody else would go to sleep, the four of us would get up and we would go into the bathroom. We would sit on the floor of the showers and we would review that day's training materials. And I would translate it from English to Spanish and we would have a discussion until I knew they understood it. Fast forward 13 weeks to graduation day, I'm nominated and named the valedictorian equivalent of the class. They call it the platoon honor man. In other words, that's the highest grade you can get in the class. It's the highest honor
Mm-hmm.
for that graduating class. And my three friends graduated in the top 10 percentile. So that experience showed me that I did have value, that I did have worth, and that my calling, I started to see a little snippet, a little vision of my calling, my purpose on this earth is to be a guide and teacher of others. And this is what I'm doing today. And so that for me was one of the key defining moments. And there have been others throughout my life, but that's where it started when I was 17 years old, 13 weeks from wanting to commit suicide. I'm in a position now to guide and train others with great success. And I realized
Mm-hmm.
everything that my parents had told me about myself was a lie. I was good for something, and other people were recognizing it. And so we all need that in our lives. We need to experience that defining moment. But the only way we can experience that defining moment is if we allow ourselves to have these new experiences, to go and try new things. So if we're feeling down, if we're feeling negative about ourselves, if we're feeling I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, we need to go out and experience what it means to have love. So, for example, if you're in an abusive relationship and you feel that you're not worthy of love, I challenge you to go to a homeless shelter and serve other people. Go to a community kitchen and serve them lunch or dinner. And just take your eyes off of yourself and your own pain and discomfort and talk to other people and look in their eyes and see that their challenges are no different from yours and your challenges are no different from them. And just by listening to other people, by walking alongside them in their journey, you will start to feel that number one, you're not alone. And number two, other people are surviving through challenges and stress, and that you can too.
I'm really moved by the way you came out of such a difficult experience. That's really inspiring.
It is inspiring. I've been able to help a lot of people over the years, and to this day, to this day, I still think about it and go, oh, what if I had just remained that 17-year-old child with the thought that I was good for nothing? I wouldn't be here talking to you and your beautiful audience today, right? But it's
Hmm.
because I wanted something. I wanted something new, so I chose to seek out a new experience. And for me, that was changing my life completely and going to join the Marine Corps. I knew nothing about it. It wasn't like I had seen a movie and said, "Oh, this looks beautiful and glamorous." And nobody
Mhm.
suggested, "Hey," they never said, "Steve, if you join the Marine Corps, all your problems will be solved and you'll find your value and worth." Nobody said that. I had to go and experience it. And it was through that experience that I allowed myself, I just immersed myself and I said, whatever happens, happens. And it turned out absolutely for the best.
That's indeed remarkable, man. Now, we often hold on to limiting beliefs without realizing it. So, can you share some common ones you have seen and how do we begin shifting them?
Again, that's another good question. What are some of the most common limiting beliefs, and how do we begin shifting them? The idea is that our limiting beliefs are, again, come from our programming. So if we just do nothing else, if you get nothing else from this interview, but recognize that currently what you think about yourself is because of what someone else told you, what someone else led you to believe. And if you realize that that's their opinions and their experiences, but it's not the truth. The truth are you are a loving, compassionate, remarkable human being, full of joy, full of resilience, full of creativity, and you just let go of the idea that you are not worthy, that you do not deserve love, that you are not qualified, that you are too fat, too skinny, that your skin is
Mhm.
too dark, that you're not educated enough, that you weren't born with a proper last name, that you don't live in the right neighborhood, that you don't have any money or you have too much money. If we just those are some of the most common limiting beliefs, right? No, I won't get that job because I don't have the education or experience. I won't get the date with that person because I don't have the right clothes or I don't speak well. All of those things are myths or they're lies. And so once you recognize that, it's very easy to move forward from there. All you simply have to do is say, when you hear that little voice is always there. And in many cases, that little voice wants to protect you
Mhm.
from rejection, for example. Steve, don't go there because you're not qualified and they're going to laugh at you. Well, I'm going to go there anyway. Let them laugh because I can laugh louder and I can laugh harder. In fact, I'll be the
Mhm.
first one. I'll be the first one to start laughing. I'll go into the meeting and say, look, I've never done this before, but I think that I can do it. And here I am, ask me questions, give me a chance, right? And just go in with that attitude. And it doesn't matter what the other people will say or what they'll do because you already know that it doesn't matter as long as you believe in yourself. But again, you have to be aware of what is that limiting belief? What is it that I'm afraid of? For example, let me give you another limiting belief that is a very, very popular one is that many people think that they are afraid to speak in public. They'll say, "Oh no, I could never get up on stage or I could never go into a networking meeting because I'm afraid of what to say. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid I'll sound stupid." And so they think that they're afraid of speaking in public. But I will share with you that that is a lie. No one is afraid of speaking in public. And how do I know this? Because we do it all the time. Every time you go to a restaurant with your friends and you talk, you're in public speaking. Every time you go to a Starbucks or a coffee shop and you order something, you're speaking in public. What we're afraid of, and this is how I know we can overcome it, what we are afraid of is making a mistake. Oh my goodness. So if we're not afraid of public speaking, but we're afraid of making a mistake, is it possible that we can learn how to speak effectively to avoid mistakes? Yes. Just like you learned to ride a bicycle. Did you make mistakes when you first got on a bicycle? Sure, you did. You couldn't hold your balance. You fell down a couple of times. You scraped your knee. You scraped your elbow. Maybe you hit your nose on the ground. But what happened? You got back up. You got back on the bicycle and you learned over time, little by little. And now, the majority of you listeners, you can ride a bicycle, you can dance, you can walk, you can drive a car, right? All of these things that we had to learn. Well, communication is much the same way. We can learn how to become effective communicators and let go of this idea that we're afraid to speak in public.
That really sounds interesting and has a unique, fresh perspective, Steve.
Yes.
Mhm. Your passion for helping people reclaim their lives is absolutely inspiring. Thank you for bringing your energy, wisdom, and incredible storytelling to the show today, Steve.
Well, thank you so much. It is a pleasure for me to be on the show. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you and Avik for producing such a wonderful show and bringing to the world, bringing to your audience such amazing guests with amazing wisdom, because this is how we learn. And once for the audience listening, if you listen to these podcasts with a desire to learn, but more important, a desire to recognize that everybody that you're listening to has a story, has a challenge. And that is what makes us interesting. That is what makes me interested in you. And that
Mhm.
is what makes you interested in me is our stories and how we got through it. Because that's how we connect to each other. Nobody wants to live a perfect life. There is no perfect life. That is boring. The person who comes to you and says, I've never had any problems, I've never had any struggles, I've never had any challenges. I've always had money, I've always had everything I've always needed and everything I've always wanted, and I've never been hurt, I've never suffered. We don't want to spend time with those people. Number one, they don't exist,
Mhm.
but we don't want to spend time with those people. We want to learn and spend time with people that think like us, that have been through the same struggle or a similar struggle, and that can teach us how to be better and how to experience life in a more joyful way.
I completely agree with that. And to all our listeners, if you have been living by someone else's script, today is the day to take the pen back. You're not your past, you're not your mistakes, you are not the labels others have given you. You're the creator of your own future. And if this conversation resonated with you, be sure to connect with Steve and learn how to step into the leading role of your own life. And remember, your story isn't over. You get to decide what happens next. Until next time, be bold, be fearless, and start writing the life you were meant to live.